I'm Stacy Grinsfelder from Blake Hill House.
And this is Devyn Caldwell from Our Philly Row. We're the hosts of True Tales from Old Houses.
Hi, Devyn.
Stacy, how are you doing?
I'm excited to be here for part 2, but of course, before we get started with that, we have little things to talk about, little things to do. What have you been up to?
Well, I think last episode I was talking about how I was working on the dining room, and as is the case with old house things, the dining room is now on hold for a brief moment because one thing causes it's like a domino effect. One thing impacts another thing, impacts another thing. That's about a month away, I think. So I moved back up to the studio, which I started last spring, and I'm actually painting walls in the studio, getting ready to put a floor down. Controversial for me, which, yeah.
That's all right. Embrace the controversy.
Yeah, I guess I'll briefly say that I have a beautiful 167-year-old wood floor that has had very little done to it, but it's not practical for what I'm doing in my studio. It has gaps in it because it's an old floor, and I work with things like glass, and I don't want the glass to get into the cracks. So I'm going to lay down a plywood overlay and paint the plywood overlay, leaving the original floor for a future generation or a future purpose.
See, I don't see this as controversial at all. I see it as protecting an asset that's there. I mean, it's easily removable. Whatever you're doing is easily removable. All repairs can be made. So I don't know. I think it sounds like a really reasonable idea based on how you're going to use that room, and better in the long run for the floor.
I think so, but it's not going to be as pretty. But, we'll make it work.
Yeah, we're not going to see the floor. Just don't point the camera at the floor.
There we go.
I think you'll be happy that you did it. Here I'm just working right now on, I don't know. What am I not working on? I've kind of got myself into some organized chaos here, but lots of little things going on. Currently, I'm working on cleaning a rug that I got off Marketplace that's really gorgeous, just beautiful and an excellent deal. But it did smell like it had been in a church basement for about, 10 years or something. So I'm cleaning it, really cleaning it, and spending some time doing that. It's going to go in my living room. But I'm also wrapping up my daughter's bedroom, finally, working on her window, which has been a lot of fun, but also very detail-oriented, restoring that. And I'm switching the ropes to chains because each of her sashes, top and bottom, weigh 25 pounds.
Wow.
And I think in the long run, it'll be a better situation because she's also we get a lot of sun on that side. So those ropes really take a beating. And I think the chains will hold up better.
This is the window that has all the diamonds, right?
It is, yeah. It has only 2 diamonds, but it's really interesting how it's pieced together. I have a picture on my blog, Blake Hill House. I should have some updates by the time this episode airs, so take a peek at that. But yeah, it's a really unique pattern. We think of diamonds, we think of sort of a standard diamond pattern, but this is really not like anything I've ever seen before. Not that it doesn't exist anywhere else, but it's unique, I think.
That's the beauty of old houses, is they often have unique things about them that we just don't see elsewhere.
Right. And you and I talk about this sometimes, not to keep on going here because we just have a couple minutes, but, we talk about, like, my house was built at a time when people would be picking or choosing their windows from catalogs. And I just find it so interesting, like, why they chose the windows that they chose for this house, because they're all very different. It's not like they picked one pattern and said, let's go for it. Let's pick all of these. I have probably 6 different styles in this house. It's wild.
That's amazing.
All right. I could talk about this all day, but, we have a limited time. We don't get to talk all day on the show.
No.
So let's do announcements. We just have 2 today. Pretty light announcement day.
The first announcement is just a reminder that the annual meeting of the Window Preservation Alliance is Saturday, October 3rd. And it's virtual this year, so please visit the windowpreservationalliance.org website for more information. We'll link it in the show notes.
So the second announcement is really just a reminder that we will be doing a merchandise run for True Tales from Old Houses merchandise during the month of October, probably towards the end of October. So be ready for that. We're kind of excited about it. All right, so we got those announcements out of the way pretty quick, and I guess we'll move on to Q&A. So how about if I ask the question and then you want to start with your answer?
Sounds good.
Okay. Today's question is, how do your families feel about your old home dedication? Go for it.
Okay, that's a really great question. I'm in a fortunate situation where it's just the three of us, my husband, myself, and the dog. And the dog never, ever objects to it. My husband goes along with pretty much anything that I want to do, although he does have final veto on things and he has used it on occasion. I get to do generally what I want to do, and he supports me in my dedication to old houses. In fact, I kind of got him on board when we started looking for houses and got him so that he's also not necessarily interested in old houses, but he appreciates them.
So is that, you think that's your full answer, or do you have any more to add to it?
I would say I have his full support in my dedication to my old house. And you know, all the way down to projects and my need for accuracy of doing things the right way and that type of thing. So yeah.
Right. How does he feel about the podcast, the fact that you do a whole podcast dedicated to old houses?
He's completely supportive of that as well.
Yeah, because I interpreted this question as basically my dedication to old houses in all ways, not necessarily my or our old house. But yeah, I feel like my husband has the patience of a saint, quite frankly. I mean, he's a wonderful, wonderful person. Now, he was very supportive of this podcast because admittedly, he was very tired of hearing about old houses and talking about old houses. So he was very supportive of me starting this podcast so that I could talk to other people about it instead. That's kind of a running joke. One of the most fun things for me about being an old house lover is that when my kids start to become that same thing too. And not all of them are totally into it, but I have a son who is a young adult now, and he'll see things and he'll say, "Oh, Mom, look at that. I thought you might like this," or "I saw this and this old house thing and I thought you'd appreciate it." And he sees that now, and that's so rewarding to me. I also have a daughter, and she actually, like most kids her age, really likes to play video games. But one of the things that she does in this particular video game that she plays is she designs houses. So it's kind of like an architecture game within a game. And she will invariably create a house that looks like an old house. And she'll tell me that. She'll say, "Oh, I've designed this one after, an old Victorian, or I've designed this after colonial." And I'm like, I love that you know that. And that makes me so happy. And, she could just as easily be designing McMansions, but no, she's noticed this balance and harmony with architecture, with old architecture. And that's probably one of the things that I love the most. So I guess to boil it all down, my family is 100% supportive of my dedication to old houses.
That's awesome. Today, we're sharing part 2 of our interview with Bill Chapman from Enon Hall. We released part 1 back on Monday, the 14th of September. So if you haven't listened to it yet, please do. When you do listen to it, or those who have listened to it, you'll remember we had some very special and genuine moments during that part of the conversation.
Right. And as a reminder, Bill and his wife, Gay, have been working on his family home, Enon Hall, for over 20 years. And when we last left off, poor little William, not David, as I tend to call him, unfortunately, little William was running down the road to escape a horrific stench in the kitchen.
Gay was cleaning out under the stove, and we uncovered a particularly gnarly old mouse nest. And as we were grossing out, I looked out the window, and William was running down the road like Forrest Gump, just running away from the house. Like, okay, well, we've lost William. He's out.
Oh, the visual. I can just see it. Oh, that's hilarious. That's funny. What did you do with all these things you found in the holes?
We have one room in the Dutch Colonial where there are built-in bookcases where we've kind of set up an exhibit space. And William set it up initially when he was really young. He's always been a curator and displayer. And Gay recently redid it. But that's where we have collected and display the most significant items that we found. We have bins full of pottery shards and things like that.
That's so cool. Wow.
And going back to the enslaved history, one of the most significant things we found is a ritual doll, the small cloth ritual doll that's probably 6 inches tall. and was found in the wall. I found it in the wall of the 1850s portion of the house, and it was part of a cache of items. And they would put these items in the wall, and they had some meaning, some purpose. And it was the ritual doll, it was a thimble, a key.
A shoe? Did you find a shoe?
We found 2 shoes in the soffit of the kitchen quarters.
Yeah, that's interesting. We touched on this subject. The very first episode of True Tales from Old Houses was Don, our guest was Don Grinda, and he did ash dump archaeology from his fireplace. And he touched on these rituals, things that people find in the walls of their houses. He did some research. That's really interesting.
So if I asked William today how he felt about being raised in an ongoing project house, what do you think he would say?
We talked about this not long ago, and his memories are of adventure and discovery. And again, it goes back to finding things, whether you're digging a hole or finding things in the walls or revealing secrets as you tore off later layers and understood more about the house and the history of the house. And he got very into researching the history of the family and the history of the area. So I think for him, he was really just viewed the whole thing as an adventure. And also, when we moved here, we moved from a home in Richmond where when we looked out the kitchen window, we could see as far as the privacy fence, and that's where life ended. And here, we have just under 7 acres, but we adjoin a large farm field and so forth, and just having space to run. And anytime kids are here, the first thing they do when they get out of the car is just start running. And so it's a great place to grow up. And I think he enjoyed it.
So he's graduated from college at this point. How old was he when you moved in again?
When we moved here full time, he was 11.
11. Okay. Now he's graduated from college. Was his focus of study related in any way to this experience he's had at Enon Hall?
No, he wound up going to art school. He went to Maryland Institute College of Art in Baltimore. He was looking at architectural restoration programs. He was looking at art school. Of course, Gay and I were rooting for the architectural restoration programs because we had great visions of him coming home with all his friends during the summer and tackling projects around here. We had it all figured out. And then he I think he got wise to us and went to art school.
Right. So I have 4 kids at this point. I would like an electrician, someone who does HVAC, and maybe a painter.
I'm still trying to influence him, which is the exact opposite of what you should do. You should act disinterested in something. There's a group out of Williamsburg that does a lot of restoration work, and it's just the coolest group because they obviously just enjoy learning from each other. And I'm like, man, I wish you lived here and could work for them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Oh, gosh. It's tricky being parents to kids who are adults now.
Yes, absolutely.
The parenting part never stops, does it? It just changes. It only changes.
Yep. But he now has with his girlfriend, he has an older house in Baltimore, and they do a lot of projects on the house. And I think he's not afraid of tackling projects because he's seen us take on some ambitious things for sure.
Let's move on to some projects. As a long-timer, we always like to ask our guests about how they feel about past projects. And can you tell us about a couple of the projects that you've done that you're particularly proud of?
I would have to say, when we decided to move here full time, we needed to build an addition because we weren't going to repurpose 19th century rooms into something they weren't supposed to be. And Gay and I worked on that for 20 straight months. And I had a list of projects that we were going to do. And then there were projects that I'm like, okay, that is way beyond our skill set. And one of those was in the addition, there are 2 new staircases that I was going to model after, or were to be modeled after the staircase in the Dutch colonial. Building and trimming out a staircase is not in my skill set. I set aside some money in the budget for a finished carpenter to do that, because the last thing you want is a staircase with rickety rails and balusters.
Kind of important.
Yeah, and things not lining up and so forth. Well, by the time I got to those 2 staircases, that money was long gone.
That never happens.
The gentleman whose company actually did the framing and did a lot of historic restoration work, he was like, you can do this. you can do this. And he came over one day and he talked 90 miles an hour at me for about 20 minutes. At me.
Like a fire hose.
Yes, it was a fire hose. And I was just standing there trying to take the notes I could, trying to soak it in, trying to ask the questions. And when he left, I was like, okay. And I started with the rear staircase, which actually goes up to my shop from the garage. So it's less visible and, than the other staircase, which is the one that is right there in the new center hall. And just moved very slowly and very deliberately, and a lot of head scratching and back and forth. And it was the slowest build ever, but it came out great. And then I had the confidence to go and do the main staircase. And so that has to be one that I look at all the time. And I'm just amazed at how solid it is, how square it is. And, and Gay and I worked on that together, and it was slow, but I'm proud of that.
What a sense of satisfaction.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, for a long time, and I haven't Googled it for a long time, but one of my claims to fame used to be, if you Googled finger splinter and looked at the images, I was like the number one image, because it is sanding fur balusters. It's so splintery. Had a splinter go all the way through my finger.
Oh, that sounds miserable.
It was pretty terrible. That was part of the staircase experience. But in terms of other projects we're proud of, the kitchen quarters has to be there at the top of the list as well. We're proud that we were finally able to do it. And that was something that we did need to hire out, that we needed that expertise. The team that did it, the owner of the company is a former timber framer from Colonial Williamsburg. It was the right group, that we had to wait for him to be available, wait till we had the funds to do it. And I was seriously concerned that building could fall down before we got to it, because it was in terrible shape. So we're proud of that. I often say the project I'm the proudest of is the most recent one we've completed, which should be the way it goes. Everyone should be hopefully better than the last as we learn.
So do you have any projects that you didn't really enjoy doing, but once they were done, they became favorites?
I don't know if there are any that I would say I didn't enjoy doing. I think one of the things that Gay and I do very well is that I know there are certain things that I'm not going to enjoy doing. And often, like, she is very great. She's very good at tedious projects that would just drive me crazy. And she enjoys them. So I think it's more about we share, or we split responsibilities on projects for things that fall within our personalities and skill sets and so forth. I can't think of a project that I would say that I hated that I was then proud of. I know one of the last things, and where Gay's patience finally broke, one of the last things we had to do in the addition was to drywall the garage. So this is not historic or anything. It's just we needed to drywall the garage. And she was helping me with it. And of course, we're lifting sheets of drywall over our heads. And she has her head braced up against the drywall, standing on a ladder. And I'm frustrated and probably missing the joists with the screws and so forth. And at one point, we were off of the ladders, and she threw her ladder at me. Picked up her aluminum 6-foot step ladder and threw it and broke the paint tray off. And it's still just a classic joke that never gets old. Every time I get that ladder, I'm like, how'd this ladder get broken? You know about this?
I have this memory of my husband and I when we were the first few years of our marriage, we didn't have a ladder. I don't know what was wrong with us, but we were doing some project, and I think it was a ceiling fan, and I'd held up 3 ceiling fans, and basically it was a chair with him with a stool on top of a chair, and me with clutched around his legs, holding the ceiling fan up with one arm so that he could to take the pressure off the ceiling fan. And, this is probably the 3rd or 4th time we're doing this. And I said, we are dumb. Like, what is wrong with us? Why do we not just buy a ladder? So, yeah, our first ladder was born out of one of those moments where I was refusing to hold a ceiling fan above my head and clutch onto my husband's knees one more time.
Not OSHA approved.
No.
So let's jump in here for a second. We got some very nice reviews on Apple Podcasts this month.
One of my favorite lines from one of the reviews was, "I listen to this at night. It makes me smile and gives me ideas." Now, my husband Andy once told me that my voice puts him right to sleep. So I admit that I was relieved she did not say that that was true for her. Leaving a rating or review is only one of the non-monetary ways that you can support True Tales from Old Houses. Other non-monetary shows of support include telling your friends or strangers about the show, or sharing us on social media. As you're listening to an episode, take a screenshot and share it with your friends and followers.
If you're feeling inspired and you want to do a little bit more, you can show us some love with a one-time or recurring donation over on the website, truetalesfromoldhouses.com. If you donate in the $20 to $25 range, we will send you an awesome coffee mug with a True Tales from Old Houses logo on it as a thank you gift. Thank you for making us a part of your week. You are the reason that True Tales from Old Houses exists.
You had to address the windows in your house. And I don't know if you know this about me. Most people do, that I love old windows, love them. And so I'm just curious, when you first started, did you ever consider modern replacements, or was that ever a thought, or did you immediately think, how am I going to get new windows made? You said you found an Amish carpenter who made a lot of
Yeah, we never considered replacing the original windows. When we built the addition, we needed windows. And we did a combination. In the kitchen, there are new casement windows. But in other parts of the addition, we replicated windows from the 1850 section that we were tying into, and were able to actually take one of those sashes to the Amish furniture maker to have him replicate it. Now, I am a huge proponent of maintaining and keeping old windows. The new windows, we are still just a single pane of glass. We did get interior storms to put throughout, which helps tremendously in the winter. There are some rooms where we actually leave them during the summer, and it helps retain the cooling as well. So no, I'm a big fan of restoring windows. Of course, learning that process and learning how to glaze a window, that goes back to the earlier question. Glazing was something that took a long time for me to learn. And once you finally learn it, and it just seems so easy, and the touch is just so easy, that's something I'm very proud of, but it took a long time.
I feel like I shouldn't have even asked you that question, but it's on my list, so why not? I am curious. Sometimes people will move into a house and they think they should replace them, and then they come around to a different decision later. So I was just curious whether from the get-go you knew, no, those windows are staying. Yep. We're figuring it out.
What was your original philosophy for improving Enon Hall? Were you planning kind of a straight-up restoration, rehabilitation, or renovation? And so how did your plans change over time?
Yeah, I don't know that we had a philosophy on day one, and it kind of evolved over time. Initially, the first number of years were really just about discovering the original house. And because it was hidden under layers of shed additions and surfaces that had been added in the 20th century, asbestos shingles and you name it. And then we got convinced that we should go through the process of putting the house on the register. And we went through phase one where we qualified, we met the basic requirements, and then were able to proceed. And we stopped at that point. And it was about the time that we had decided that we were going to move here full time. And part of the philosophy that we developed was this is a family home. And every generation did something different to the house to meet the needs of that generation. As the family grew, as more children were born, as multiple generations were living in the house, and why should we lock it down at any point and say, okay, nothing can change beyond this point? When it's a family house, and it's especially our family house for so many generations, then the house should continue to respond to our needs. Then it was more about, like when we built the addition, we wanted it to complement the older parts of the house. So, for when I was deciding what the windows would look like, how the doors would be trimmed out, what the staircases would look like. I was constantly going back down to the Dutch Colonial and figuring out how things were built there, matching the trim, matching the construction of the door casings, and so forth. So it's been more of a philosophy of restoring to original where we can, but then also being sensitive to this is a home, and this is a home that tells the story of a family over many generations. Going back to William or David or whatever his name is, talking about the many discoveries that we would make, finding things in the walls and so forth. He kind of picked that up himself, and before we would close in a wall, he would draw a picture or write a poem about the house or about our work on the house. You talked about shoes in the walls above our laundry room in the addition. There's a Converse, up above the door in the wall. So he left his mark on the house as well. So picking up on those traditions that we saw in the old part of the house and continuing them with our family.
All right. Well, as someone who's been doing this a long time, I have to ask you the question about burnout. I imagine that after so many years, perhaps you and Gay felt some burnout at times. Maybe I'm wrong, but if you did feel it, how did you push through? How did you get through those moments where you were just kind of over it?
Yeah, when we were building the addition and we're focused on that for literally 7 days a week, every daytime hour, and we were trying to get it done because it was our entire life, including William's life. And we wanted to get to a point where we could refocus on things that he was interested in and that he wanted to do. We'd been living for those 20 months with really 99% of our stuff in storage and really living almost a camping existence here while we were working on the addition. And in many ways, that was an amazing time because it was very unplugged. We didn't have a TV. Nobody was working. We were totally focused on the house. We would gather together in the evening and watch a Netflix movie on my laptop, the three of us sitting together and sharing that. When Christmas rolled around, we had no Christmas decorations because they were all in storage. So we made our Christmas decorations out of construction material that we found. So we still have those, and we still put them on the tree. But when we started getting to the end, started getting to that 80% mark, that's when the burnout started to kick in too, because everything seems to slow down at 80% instead of speed up. That last leg is the longest. So, we were really just we had to push through. We had to get back to normal lives. We had to get to things that William wanted to do. After that process, what we learned to do is, people are constantly asking us, even today, when are you going to be done? And we always respond, there is no done. This is our lifetime project, and we're fine with that. This is our hobby, but it no longer is our sole personal identification, our identity. When we, stopped the blog, part of it was to reinflate as individuals because we had become so one-dimensional to ourselves and to our friends. Even if we would, on the rare occasions that we would go to somebody else's house or go visit old friends in Richmond, all they knew to talk to us about was the house and the website. And after a while, you're like, I'm really more three-dimensional than that, and need to get back to the other parts of my interests and my personality and restore personal connections. So since then, we tried not to put deadlines on projects. And I tend to be a little spontaneous with projects, and sometimes I'll go to bed on Sunday night and think, I had no idea I was going to finally get that done this weekend, because it'll be something that I'll just wake up Saturday morning and feel inspired. And this is the day I'm going to put that door hardware on or hang those doors. When we finished the addition, we had just open door casings all throughout the addition. And it was almost a year later before I started hanging the doors. And most of the doors still have no hardware. Taking the pressure of deadlines off is huge.
Coming to terms with and making peace with the idea that you'll never be finished is a really important part of old house ownership. Because as soon as you start thinking, I'm going to reach the end sometime, I'm going to reach the end, and then you never do, it can be really disheartening after years and years and years.
Yeah, and I think the other danger is that it's really easy to get sucked into a new project. Around here, it could start by wanting to explore a mystery of why is this jam built out to an additional thickness. What is behind there? What's the story? Next thing you know, you've torn out a wall. I mean, you generally.
Well, no, I'm taking that to heart because, yes, I did tear out a wall. Yes.
And then she, meaning gay, will come along and go, holy cow, we can't have two totally destroyed spaces, So right now, it's about limiting the projects. So I have one bedroom that is completely a construction zone, but that is the only place right now where that's happening. And I'm resisting the urge to start something else before I can finish that. That helps tremendously as well.
Right. Yeah. This is the conversation my husband and I have all the time. I say, oh, I'm going to do this thing. He's like, no, please don't start that. Don't start that.
Absolutely.
But starting is so much more fun than finishing sometimes.
The demo and exploration is so easy and so fun and so enticing. But then it takes a long time to put it back together.
Well, let's start wrapping it up. I'd like to call this wrap-up session Instagram Minds Want to Know. And you mentioned on your Instagram account that you were going to be on our podcast and you had some questions that were born from that. So Devyn, would you like to ask those?
Sure. So this question, actually, the first question just comes from someone who asked you behind the scenes. What is your criteria and reasoning for keeping or replacing building fabric? Also, in your restoration, where is the line with adding modern elements?
I'm really focused on original materials more than later renovations. I want to capture the history of the spaces, but if I can return things to the way that they were originally, that's my objective. In terms of modern conveniences, if you want to call them that, like HVAC, like electricity, plumbing. I mean, you have to have those in order to live in a house. I don't try to, we have run HVAC everywhere that we could do it without getting into spaces where we don't want, ducts and so forth. Power outlets, we try to put them in the baseboard instead of putting them in the middle of plaster walls. So they're a little more subtle. It's also kinder to the plaster walls. When we ran air conditioning, there is actually one room downstairs in the Dutch Colonial that has no heat or air conditioning because it would have meant running ducts through the room in the cellar that is directly below it. And we had actually pulled all the systems out of that room. That's where that cellar room, there used to be the oil boiler was down there. All the pipes that ran to all the radiators were hanging down there. The water heater was hanging down there. And it's a wonderful old room with its own hearth and a brick floor. So we wanted to keep all the systems out of there. So the room directly above that, as a result, has no HVAC. But wonderfully, it stays perfectly cool in the summer, and it gets enough heat in the winter. If we're going to use it, we'll augment with a space heater in there. So as much as possible, we try to preserve original materials. Sadly, there's a lot of original fabric that was removed long before we bought the house. So we're in a process of going through and removing drywall and replacing it with plaster. But I'm playing by the rules, and I'm doing it one room at a time.
That's the best way. So we have one final question for you. Dennis wants to know, what would it take for you to live somewhere else?
Wow. I don't think I would. I don't think there would be anything that would convince me to move somewhere else. We've put too much into this property. We feel very much at home here. We've certainly put blood, sweat, tears finances into the property. There's not a day when we don't look around and say, this is a beautiful place, and are proud of what we've done. And I plan to spend eternity here out in the graveyard. I often tell people that, we talked about deadlines on projects. The only project around here that has a deadline is the graveyard wall. Needs serious repair because we had some storm damage several years ago and took a tree down over the wall and knocked down part of it, and the whole thing needs to be repointed and so forth. So that project has a deadline. It needs to be done the day before I move in. So no, to answer the question, no, we wouldn't. We've asked the question, we posed the question, if we cashed in and could move anywhere in the world, where would we go? And we can't come up with anywhere we'd rather be than here.
That's great. That's really great.
Yeah. Well, home is where the heart is, and you've put so much heart into Enon Hall. It shows. I could just tell, and I really love this conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed having it with you. Love following your work as well, so it's great to see you face-to-face virtually.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us for so long. Your stories are just rich and interesting to hear.
We really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you both. I follow the podcast, and I have folks who I have followed for a long time have been featured on the podcast, so it's a privilege, and I enjoyed talking with you both.
Thank you. All right. Well, we will talk to you again another time. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening. For more information about this episode, including show notes and transcripts, visit truetalesfromoldhouses.com.
Until next time.
Bye for now.